This is an insult. My father would never do this.
She's a house girl and nobody. This will is fake.
I assure you both, Chief Kenneth Eze signed this himself, in my presence, before 2 witnesses.
She manipulated him. She used his sickness against him. Everyone can see that.
I have not said a word since I walked into this room.
You don't need to say anything. Your presence alone is an embarrassment.
Please continue, sir.
Before I read the full will, Chief Kenneth requested that this letter be read aloud first.
What letter?
He called it the record.
Nobody in Chief Kenneth Eze's household ever learned Rebecca's last name. Not his wife, not his son Chidi, not her daughter Amaka, not the gate man, not the driver, not the cook who worked beside her every morning for 11 years. She was simply Rebecca, the house girl, and that was enough of an identity for everyone who lived inside that enormous Maitama compound. She arrived at 19, a village girl from Enugu with 1 bag, 2 dresses, and a letter of recommendation from a pastor who knew Chief Kenneth's late business partner. She was not beautiful in the way that men stop walking. She was not loud. She was not the kind of woman who filled a room when she entered. She was the kind of woman who made sure the room was clean before anyone else arrived, and who slipped out before anyone thought to say thank you. In 11 years, nobody ever said thank you. Chief Kenneth Eze had built his fortune across 3 decades: real estate in Abuja, oil servicing contracts in Port Harcourt, a logistics company that moved goods across 6 states. He was the kind of man whose handshake closed deals that lawyers spent weeks trying to structure. In his prime, he was sharp, commanding, and quietly generous to people nobody else noticed. That was the man Rebecca met. That was the man she served. But the family Rebecca served was something else entirely. Madam Chioma, Chief Kenneth's wife, ran the household with a precision of a military officer and the warmth of a courtroom. She had grown up with money and married into more of it, and somewhere between those 2 facts, she had developed a permanent contempt for anyone who served her. Rebecca learned this on her 3rd day, when Madame brought morning tea 1 minute late, and Madame poured it onto the kitchen floor without a word and told her to clean it up. Rebecca cleaned it up. Chidi was 26 when Rebecca arrived, already wearing his father's name like a crown he had not earned. He drove expensive cars badly, spent money loudly, and spoke to domestic staff the way people speak to furniture. He once threw a plate of food at the kitchen wall because the pepper soup was too hot, and when it splattered across Rebecca's arm, he did not look at her once. He looked at the wall and said someone should clean that. Rebecca cleaned it. Amaka was worse in a different way. Where Chidi's cruelty was lazy and careless, Amaka's was deliberate. She studied Rebecca the way a person studies a thing they want to break carefully. She would invite friends to the house and perform for them, snapping her fingers at Rebecca mid-sentence, correcting her in front of guests over things that needed no correction, once telling a group of her friends that Rebecca was proof that some people were simply born for certain positions in life. Her friends laughed. Rebecca poured more drinks and said nothing. She was very good at saying nothing. What nobody in that house understood was that Chief Kenneth was watching all of it. Not obviously, not in the way that announces itself. He was a man who built a business empire by observing what people did when they thought they were unobserved, and he applied that same quiet attention to his own household. He watched how Rebecca moved through his home, the care she took, the silence she maintained, the particular dignity with which she absorbed humiliation without letting it touch the quality of her work. He watched other things too. He watched how his children spoke to the gateman versus how they spoke to their friends. He watched how Madam Chioma treated delivery men at the front door. He watched who called him on his birthday versus who called when they needed something. He kept a small notebook, dark green, the size of a palm, and he wrote things down in it, the way an accountant records figures, dates, names, incidents, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. The first entry about Rebecca was from her 4th month in the house. Chidi spilled the entire contents of his bag in the parlour, looking for his car keys, cursed loudly, walked out. Rebecca, who had not been asked, who had no reason to stop what she was doing, quietly gathered everything from the floor, sorted it, placed it neatly on the center table, and went back to the kitchen. Nobody saw her, nobody character. The entries about his children were different. There was the entry from the year Chidi crashed his 3rd car and came home demanding Chief Kenneth cover it quietly so the insurance company would not raise his premiums. There was the entry from the time Amaka called Rebecca a witch, openly in the compound in front of the gateman and the driver, because a dress she had asked Rebecca to hand wash came back with a small crease. There was the long, painful entry from the night Chief Kenneth overheard his wife on the phone, telling her sister that she had already decided what she would do with the Lekki property the moment Chief Kenneth was gone. He closed the notebook that night and sat in his study for a very long time. When the dementia began, it came quietly, the way all the most devastating things come, not with noise, but with small silences where something used to be. He forgot a meeting, then a name, then where he had placed his glasses, then why he had walked into a room, then what year his father had died. His doctor used careful language. His family used careful language too. Around guests, behind closed doors, they used different language. Rebecca used no language at all. She simply adjusted. She learned which mornings were harder and made sure those mornings began gently. Tea at the right temperature. Curtains opened slowly. No sudden noise. She learned that he sometimes woke in the night not knowing where he was. And she was the one who heard him on those nights because his wife had moved to the guest room 6 months after the diagnosis. She would sit with him in the dim hallway and speak quietly about ordinary things. The weather, the garden, what she had cooked that afternoon. Until the confusion passed and he recognized himself again. He always recognized her. Even in the worst months, when names slipped from him like water, he always knew Rebecca. Chidi visited on Sundays when it was convenient and spent most of those visits on his phone in the parlour. Amaka flew in twice a year and both times spent more time photographing the artwork in the house than sitting with her father. Madam Chioma managed the household finances with increasing authority and decreasing transparency. And when Chief Kenneth once asked about a property transaction she had authorized without telling him, she told him gently that he was confused again and perhaps he should rest. Rebecca heard that exchange from the corridor. She went to the kitchen and stood very still for a long time. 2 years before Chief Kenneth died, he called his lawyer, Mr. Bello, to the house on a Tuesday morning when Madam Chioma was out. Chioma had traveled to Abuja for a family event and the children were away. He sat in his study with a dark green notebook open on the desk and he dictated changes to his will with the precision of a man who had spent months deciding exactly what he wanted to say. Mr. Bello asked him once, gently, professionally, whether he was setting. Chief Kenneth looked at him the way he used to look at people who underestimated him in boardrooms. Mr. Bello did not ask again. Chief Kenneth also dictated a letter. He called it the record. It took 2 hours. When it was finished, he signed it, sealed it personally, and handed it to Mr. Bello with instructions that it be read aloud in full, before the will, in front of everyone on the day it was needed. He died on a Thursday morning in March, quietly, in his own bed, with Rebecca sitting in the chair beside him because she had heard his breathing change in the night and had not left his side. His family arrived by afternoon. The grief in that house had different textures. Madam Chioma wept with the volume of a woman performing for neighbors. Chidi stood in the compound making phone calls. Amaka moved through the rooms with the focused eyes of someone taking inventory. And Rebecca moved through it all, serving, cleaning, holding the household together the way she had always done, invisible and essential in equal measure. The burial was large and expensive and loud with praise for a man many of the attendees had barely known. 3 weeks later, Mr. Bello called the family to his office. Rebecca received a call too. She almost did not go. Amaka had told her the morning the call came that her services were no longer needed and she should begin packing. She packed. She also answered Mr. Bello's call. She dressed in her plain blue dress, the best thing she owned, and she took a taxi to the office on her own. She sat at one end of the long mahogany table. The family sat at the other end, 3 expensive perfumes and one collective assumption filling the space between them. Mr. Bello read the record from the beginning. Chief Kenneth's voice came through every sentence, measured, precise, and devastating. He named dates. He named incidents. He described in calm, careful language what he had watched his children do and failed to do over 20 years. He described what he heard his wife say about the Lekki property. He described the night Amaka called Rebecca a witch in the compound, and the afternoon Chidi's plate hit the kitchen wall. He described every Sunday Chidi spent on his phone in the parlour, every visit Amaka turned into an inventory check, every night Madam Chioma chose the guest room over her husband's confusion and fear. And then he described Rebecca. He described her the way a man studied something for years and finally understood completely. The morning tea, the curtains, the hallway conversations at 2 in the morning, the way she cleaned up every mess without being asked and never once made him feel ashamed for needing her. He wrote that she had treated him like a human being when his own family had begun treating him like a transaction. He wrote that she was the only person in his household who served him out of something that resembled love, and that he was old enough and clear-eyed enough to know the difference. The room was completely silent by the time Mr. Bello finished the letter. Chidi's face had gone the color of ash. Amaka was very still, in the way people go still when something has struck them somewhere they did not know they could be struck. Madam Chioma was staring at the table with the expression of a woman replaying 11 years of phone calls and wondering which ones had been overheard. Then Mr. Bello opened the will. Rebecca received everything. The Maitama compound, the Lekki property, the Port Harcourt holdings, the logistics company, every account, every asset, structured into a trust administered by Mr. Bello himself, with conditions that protected it from any legal challenge his family might attempt. Conditions Chief Kenneth spent 2 years making watertight with the same precision he had applied to every business deal of his life. His wife received a monthly allowance, enough to live on, nothing more. His children received a single line: "I gave you everything while I lived. You chose what to do with it. This is my choice." Chidi stood up first. His voice came out wrong, too high, too fast. He said it was manipulation. He said Rebecca had used the old man's sickness against him. He said there would be lawyers, courts, appeals, the whole machinery of a family that had just realized what their arrogance had actually cost them. Rebecca sat with her hands folded and let him finish. Then she looked at Mr. Bello and asked what she needed to sign. The legal challenge came. It lasted 14 months. It cost Chidi and Amaka money they did not have as freely as they had assumed, and it ended the way Mr. Bello had quietly told Rebecca it would end, with a judge who had read Chief Kenneth's letter and found nothing in it that resembled confusion, only the very precise accounting of a man who had seen his family clearly and decided accordingly. The compound in Maitama passed to Rebecca on a Wednesday. She stood at the gate for a long time before she went inside. She had walked through that gate thousands of times, carrying groceries, taking out waste, returning from errands with her arms full and nobody watching. She walked through it now differently. Not with triumph, not with the noise that the moment might have invited. She walked through it the way she had always done everything, quietly and with complete intention. She did not change much in the house at first. She kept the garden the way Chief Kenneth had liked it. She kept his study intact, the dark green notebook in its place on the shelf, because she understood that some things deserved to remain exactly where they were. She hired staff. She treated them the way she had always believed people should be treated, with the ordinary dignity that costs nothing and means everything. She learned the business with Mr. Bello beside her, slowly at first and then with a growing confidence that surprised people who met her and had already decided what she was. Madam Chioma came 6 months after the judgment. She arrived without calling. She stood at the gate in clothes that were still expensive but carried a different weight now, the weight of a woman who had spent 6 months adjusting to an allowance and discovering that an allowance feels very different from ownership. The gateman called Rebecca. Rebecca came to the gate herself. They stood on opposite sides of it for a moment. Madam Chioma opened her mouth and something crossed her face that Rebecca had never seen there in 11 years. Something that looked genuinely and painfully like shame. She said she wanted to talk. Rebecca opened the gate. She did not offer the parlour. She offered the garden chairs, the ones beside the hibiscus that she had always been the one to water. She brought tea herself the way she had brought it 10,000 mornings before, and she sat across from the woman who had poured it on the floor and watched. Madam Chioma talked for a long time about regret, about the things she had not seen because she had chosen not to look, about the phone call, the one about the Lekki property, and how it had sounded so much worse read aloud in a lawyer's office than it had felt in a private moment of ugly, unguarded thinking. Rebecca listened the way she had always listened, completely, without interruption. When Madam Chioma finished, Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Then she said that she bore no anger. That was true. She had processed anger years ago, alone in the kitchen after 1,000 small cruelties, and she had let it go each time because carrying it would have bent her into something she did not want to become. What she felt now was not warmth and it was not coldness. It was something more honest than both, the clear-eyed recognition of what had happened and the decision to move forward without dragging it behind her. She told Madam Chioma that the allowance would continue. She did not say it as generosity, she said it as information. Chidi came 3 months after his mother. He sat in those same garden chairs with the particular discomfort of a man who had never in his life needed to ask anyone beneath him for anything, and now found himself needing exactly that. He had lost a business venture, money he had borrowed assuming the inheritance would cover it. He came to ask if Rebecca would consider a loan. He could not fully look at her while he asked. Rebecca considered it for exactly as long as it deserved. Then she told him she would not give him a loan. She told him she would, however, offer him a position in the logistics company, an entry-level position, structured properly, with a salary that reflected the work and not the name. She told him the offer was open for 2 weeks and she would not extend it. Chidi left without answering. He came back 11 days. Amaka never came. She stayed in Lagos and sent a message through Chidi. Brief, proud, the kind of message that wants reconciliation without the cost of humility. Rebecca read it once and set it aside. She did not respond, not out of cruelty, because cruelty had never been her language, but because she understood that some people needed to carry the full weight of their choices before they were ready to put them down, and forcing that process helped no one. She left the door unlocked. That was enough. On the first anniversary of Chief Kenneth's death, Rebecca did something she had thought about for a long time. She endowed a scholarship. Not a large ceremony. She had no interest in large ceremonies. A quiet endowment through a foundation Mr. Bello helped her structure, providing university education for girls from Enugu villages who had no way to fund it themselves. She named it not after herself and not after Chief Kenneth, though she thought of him every time she signed the documents. She named it after her mother, who had packed her 1 bag and 2 dresses and sent her to Abuja at 19 with the words, "Carry yourself well, no matter what they do to you." She had carried herself well, even when nobody was watching, especially then. Should a woman who serves with dignity be treated like she's invisible, or does real character always find its way to the surface? Drop your thoughts below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today and drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.